Hello everyone, and welcome back to Smith's Garage. This video is going to be about how to clean, bench test, and tune your Weber carburetors. I believe that everybody, once they buy a set of Weber carbs, should do this before putting them in their car, because I don't care if they said that they bench tested them before sending them out, but I know mine weren't, and I put them in and they weren't working very well. So this is a video I wish I would have watched before I went through everything I went through with my carburetors. So let's just dive right into this. Okay, so number one, I believe in a clean workspace, so I like to set out some paper towel, make sure everything's nice and wiped down. You don't want any grit and debris. Speaking of that, there's already some grit and debris on here from what I've been doing. Flip it over. Just because carburetors are have a lot of small little parts, they're very finicky, and yeah, you just want to have a nice starting platform. So I just got to quickly start and get these velocity stacks off and the mount for my air cleaner, and then we'll get into the important parts. Okay, so I remember when I first got the carburetors on this car that but the velocity stacks were just right on there, and I didn't know how these went for sure. So there's a little gasket that goes on there. This plate went on there, and then the velocity stacks go on top of that, and then you put the little lock washers and studs onto these with the velocity stacks underneath your air cleaner. Yeah. So anyways, you want to pull that all off. Make sure that this gasket looks good. If they have it, mine is still good and reusable. It's nice and thick. So then this is kind of what your basic, these are 44 IDF Weber carbs to be exact. I know I hadn't specified that yet, but that's what these are. Ignore my little stuff going on there. That's because of my throttle linkage. And this guy right here is just an adapter for my fuel lines, so you don't have to worry about those. First thing we're going to do is pull off the 5 flathead screws inside of here. Actually, sorry, before that, we're going to pull out these. And you want to get a nice and big, thick flathead. It's really important to have well-fitting tools on these because everything's really soft. Nothing requires very much torque. You just want to be very gentle, and it doesn't take much. It's all in an aluminum housing as well, so very easy to screw it up. We're going to come back to these guys a little later in the video and talk about the specifics, but I'm just going to set them up there. But yeah, as I said, well-fitting screwdriver. Just pull out all these 5 screws. Okay, so once you get those 5 screws out, this plate has your float underneath of it, and there's a gasket that runs all the way around. It's a very thin gasket, and when you're lifting this up, you want to be very careful that that gasket comes with this assembly because it's tucked up underneath of your float. So I kind of like to try to pinch the corners of the gasket as I'm coming up to make sure it slides off with the studs. There we go. So there's the float hanging down underneath of there, and this is that thin gasket that kind of sits in limbo. You want to be very careful not to tear any of it. But when you put it down, just tip it upside down, and we're going to put this aside over here for now. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the main jets off, or the main jets off. Still find a good size flathead. If you're taking these out of your car, this bowl is going to be full of gas, so you're going to want to dump that out into another container. Otherwise, you're just going to gas yourself out doing this. Ooh. So one of the first things you're going to want to start checking now is all of these bolts have holes in them. And you want to make sure that you can clearly see through the holes and make sure there's no debris in there. And even try to look up that bottom one and make sure there's no debris. This is where it'd be helpful to have like even a piece of welding wire or something. You can even poke it through or poke it down this and see if you can see it stick out. Because I've had many instances where machined brass from all of this stuff getting machined has actually been stuck inside of there still, or dirt and debris can get in there from just daily use. Here's your main jet that was being held down. You want to make sure that you can look up and down that little hole there. You want to make sure that's all clear, and you want to make sure that there is a little tiny top washer, and in the bottom of that hole there's another washer. It'll either stick to the bottom of that or it'll be stuck in the bottom of your hole. You can pull it out if you want. Sometimes you just need like a tiny pair of pliers or something, and you can just get in there and grab it. But it's not too important to take out as long as you remember it's in there and don't tip it upside down. But I'm just going to take mine out for the purpose of doing everything the same. And to make it easier, if you have dual carbs, you can do both of them at the same time as well. I've already done the other carburetor just to kind of freshen myself up before making this video. So that's why I'm only doing this one. Here's the other bolt. Little washer on top. And the jet. And I'm going to pull the washer out of the bottom. Oop, I dropped it into the valve. That's okay, because you can lift it up and then just let it go and it'll come out. And like I said, you want to keep everything nice and organized, because there's a lot of complicated little moving parts in these. So next I'm going to take out that little bottom brass piece in the bottom of the float, right in there. Now there's a couple of ways of doing this. The easier one being just I'll do it the way everybody else would, using a flat head, getting it in there, and then using a pair of pliers to get it out. But there's another little tool you can buy. I'm not even sure what this tool is called. Looks like this. It's spring-loaded, so you can kind of pull it in and twist. And then that middle piece will stay straight. And then once you push it back in and kind of let go, it'll click sideways again. So what this is for is it's actually specifically for these. Actually, I'll use this. You just have to crack it with the flathead first. Crack it. Stick this guy in there. Okay. Then you just kind of push it down tiny until it clicks. Now it's locked in. And then you just spin this. Now it's locked on the end. It's very specifically for this. The likelihood of some of you guys having this is slim. And you just gotta unlock it, pull it out, and you again want to check, make sure that it looks all nice and clean. This one you can't see through because there's a little ball inside of there. That's normal. You should be able to hold it up to a light and see it glow inside, because it's at least mine does. That's how I know that there's no debris stuck in there. The likelihood of debris being stuck in this guy is pretty slim. And if you really want to just be sure, get a flashlight and you can look in the holes from those tall brass pieces, because those ones are decently important, and make sure those are clean. Then we just kind of move on to this plate right here. Now this is the main pump, kind of. So when you are stepping on the gas and it's pulling the linkage down, this lever comes up and that pumps the gas up and through and out the jet at the top. So get an appropriate sized flathead, which this one's actually a little too big. These screws are slightly smaller. Now, just as a bit of a forewarning, this plate has a little bit of it's going to try to launch out at you. Remember the first time I took this off, it was shot off at me. It's not that high tension, but Still not what you're fully expecting usually. So you should have this flat kind of rubbery piece and then a spring underneath of there. You're just kind of looking in here to see if there's any dirt and grit anywhere. There shouldn't be, and you look in that little hole in the bottom, make sure that there's no dirt or grit. I'm actually just going to go ahead and put this one back together right away because it's kind of annoying leaving it apart. So you put the spring in first, and then you just have to hold. It's kind of a painful process getting this back on, actually. You just kind of hold it so the holes line up. And then get this back on. Shit. You just want to make sure that that little lever in the back is going to push on the top notch of that and not of the gasket and not slip off. Okay, there we go. It's all lined up. Okay, so now while we're on this side of the carburetor, basically we're not going to worry about those. This one, this one, this one, this one, and that long one there. Some of these are to control the airflow and more fancy things. They're a little above my pay grade. The only ones we are going to worry about are the idle mixture screws you can see here and here. And what you want to do is you just want to spin them in. You can do it by hand or with a flathead, but very gently find the seat. You don't want to go too much. Do the same to the other side. Gently turn it in until it finds the seat. Now I'm going to use the screwdriver actually because it's easier for me to watch, but we want to turn them 1.5 full turns out. This is a bench set, these carburetors, and just, yeah. And for the idle mixture one, you want to actually back it off until it's not touching this lever anymore. Back it off until, let's see if I can get this camera to see this. There's a slight gap. And then all you want to do is twist it back until it's touching, which it almost is. Okay, I'm grabbing a flathead. I can't turn that by hand. Until it's touching. And then we'll just do, okay, touching, a half more turn. You're probably going to have to change that again once it's in the car, but that is the base setting for these carburetors. Now back onto the cleaning of the carburetors. This side is kind of done. You also just want to make sure that there's no debris sitting in the bottom of your float. One thing I will say that there's probably a difference that people are noticing. In here, there's usually a set of Venturis, which are a circular hole. I'll grab my original ones. A circular hole, it looks like a piece like this that sits in there like that. I've recently taken mine out and replaced them with an upgraded piece. This one sprays fuel out in a specified point in the middle. This is a bar with holes all the way along the bottom, and it mists it out across the entire length of the cylinder. And the outer diameter of this sleeve is also just wider, so there's more airflow. I haven't tried these out yet because I just put them in and I wanted to make this video. So, but I just wanted to share that difference that some people may notice. Now, along with all the other cleaning we've been doing, I'm just going to take the main carburetor body and put it to the side. I'd like to come and address the top section of this. So this float here, which you want to be decently gentle with, there's a little tiny pin that holds it in. Getting it started to come out is a little bit difficult, but as long as you have something small, it should just push out. Just a pin, just like that, nothing crazy. Put that aside and do not lose that, very important. And then this should just slide up. Slide it up a little bit and then push it back. Actually, you know what? Ignore that. Just take it up all the way and watch, because your little seat is going to follow with it. Now take your float and put it to the side. Actually, if you want, you can take a little look at your float. Make sure there's no cracks or anything in it. Make sure it feels nice and light and airy still. I had a float that cracked and filled with gas and got really heavy, and I didn't notice. But this guy is very important, because when your float is sitting at its base, that sits all the way at the very bottom. So you want to make sure that your float, when it's at the bottom, this pin is going to come down and seat and stop letting gas in. But when your float raises up, not raises up, I guess it'd be lowering down because this is upside down. Lowering down because the gas is emptying out of your bowl, this needle is going to raise up and it's going to let gas pour in to your cylinder, into your bowl, and then it'll deliver it to the rest of your engine. So this has to be nice looking, and don't scratch it, don't push on it, don't drop it. Very delicate. That's why I'm just going to gently sit it up there for now. And you want to make sure there's no grit in this hole either. So the last thing we're going to do is take off this nut. Holy shit. Ow. Okay, so once you get that off, this is where one of the little fuel filters is. So you're going to have a washer, it's like a papery washer gasket. Don't lose that. And then in here, you have your little filter. You can see mine has a tiny bit of grit on it because my fuel tank is the original one, so there's a bit of grit in there. But that means that this has been doing its job. So you want to check yours, and if it's dirty, you can use brake cleaner, anything that evaporates to clean any of this stuff out. But yeah, and once you do this, that is basically all the components. Oh wait, it's not. Don't listen to me. But yeah, once you're done that, you want to put this back together. So that's all together. This little guy is clean with this. So this is the needle, that's the seat. It's the needle and seat. That's what lets the carburetor bowl fill with fuel. And the last thing we're going to do is set the float height, which is a little bit of a complicated process. I'm going to put my gasket back on just to show it. She gives you a better reference on the like what's here and how close the float is. So we're going to grab our needle and we're going to just gently sit it back into there. And we're going to grab our float. So before I put this in, I want you to pay attention. There's this lever here, that lever there. Those are the two levers that, once this is sitting back in there like that, those are the two levers that you have to bend. So one of the levers, this bottom one, is the one for the closed position. This one is for the open position. I'll explain that shortly here. So you're just gonna bring it down and then hook that lever back into the needle and get that hinge back in. The low position that you want is based off of this. Get in here. So, there we go. Based off of that, that is your closed position. Not like this. There's a spring in there. So that's compressed spring. You want the spring to be just sitting like that. That's open. You want it closed like that. That is when the needle is seated. So when it's in this position, you want somewhere between 10 to 14 millimeters between this gasket and the top of that float. Spec says 14 millimeters. I've heard people say 10. I've tried 14. I've tried 12. But I've noticed I have had better results with 10. 10 also gives you equal from the here to there. The distance between the float and the gasket is the same all the way across. It's fully even. And that's another reason why I like using 10 millimeters. So in order to set that, you need to get a pair of pliers, and most likely you want to almost pull this back out again, because no matter what, you do not want to put pressure on the needle and seat. So you'll want to pull it back out, grab a pair of pliers. These are like soft jaw pliers. They have no teeth on them. And you'll just get in there. I think you can actually get in like this. Yeah, you can. You can get in there like that right now. And you can just tweak it a little bit. Very, very minor adjustments. And another good little trick is I was using a pair of calipers to get mine set, but you can also cut a piece of cardboard to 10 millimeters in distance and you can stick it in there just to measure it with something solid so you're not looking at numbers all the time. And that is how I set my float. There's also a set for how far down it sits. Ignore this gasket. It's getting in the way a little bit here. So the down one, not as important. The down position is not as important. I believe it's 37 millimeters or 27 millimeters. As long as it's down and it's going to open and it's not going to touch the bottom of your float, that's okay. The down isn't the most important. So now that we have all of that taken into consideration, there's one last piece that you have to really make sure has been cleaned out. And it's these guys, because they come apart. Getting them apart is sometimes difficult. The first step that's a little bit easier to do is they can come apart right there. So grab the top and the bottom and just pull them apart. Like so. Now on this one, this top piece and this bottom piece can come off. Sometimes you're lucky and they can come off by hand, but this is where I like to be very delicate. I use these because they have no teeth on them, so they don't do any marring. And I just gently put it right here, and I just give it a little twist until it comes off. Now this is where your actual jet size will come into play, which I will explain in a moment. You'll want to do the same thing for this one. Just get it on there like that. Give it a little twist. Again, you don't want one with teeth or anything that's going to mark this up. These are all very precisely machined pieces. And there you go. I'm not going to take my other one apart because I don't need to, but I think you get the gist. So the first things that I would usually check, all of these have little holes in the sides of them. You want to make sure that top and bottom one go right the way through. Spin it 90 degrees. Top and bottom one go all the way through. And now you're not supposed to be able to see through this one, but I like to try to look in there with the light and make sure it just looks like it's a flat bottom. Same with these two small pieces. You want to make sure they're nice and open and clear, that you can see through them. And same with this last stack. And now when people talk about jet sizes, these are the pieces they're talking about. So I have dual Weber 44 carburetors for a 2276cc engine. When I first got these carburetors, my jet size was the bottom one, main one was a 135, and this top one was a 175. I haven't put these in my car yet, but I had somebody tell me that having such a small size with such a big engine was really restricting the amount of gas I was getting at a higher RPM. So now I've been trying out a 165, which is, by the way, these numbers are like 165 is 1.65 millimeters, this opening, and a 190. So this is for the airflow, breathability. This is for the gas that's going to be coming. The gas that's going to be coming from your bowl and then up this tunnel and then out into here on either side. So that's like your main flow of gas. Your main gas flow is from these pieces. And for reference, I had a piece of machined brass stuck in here, and it was totally screwing up everything on my engine. And when you're putting them back together, you want to make sure you have everything the right way. So the round flat one goes on the top. You just gotta get it in there, and it nicely slides in. And the top is the opposite of the one that has these like angled beveled holes. Then you have the cone-shaped piece, and that one goes in the bottom. And you want to make sure those like nicely and tightly slide in there. These ones were loose when I first put them in, so in order to get them to come out a little wider, there's two ways you can do it. You can stick a flathead in there and just try to pull it apart a tiny bit, but I found that these pliers, you could actually stick them in the hole and then pull them apart just a little. And that was just enough to get it to be a snug fit. It's not too crucial because these end up just going into the carburetor and getting like pinched at the bottom, but I just like having everything fit the way it's supposed to. And that guy slides together like that. This one slides together like that. And now, if you've triple checked that everything's nice and clean, everything's all good to go, we set our idle screws, we set our idle time. Now we can start putting everything back together. Not those yet though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my two bottom washers for my idle jets here, and I'm going to drop them in there. And I'm going to use I have a little baby flathead here. I'm just going to use that and make sure they're seated or sitting flat and not on an angle. Last thing you want to do is have it get squished in a weird way. Going to take sit them there. Our screws that we checked were clean. We're going to put the washer back on it. Put it in there. These just need to be snug, not very tight. Everything's delicate. You want to make sure you get your flathead to span nicely across these so you don't mar up anything or strip them. Then we're going to put this guy back in the bottom of the float. I'm going to use my handy little tool, but if you don't have a handy little tool like this, you can just use a pair of pliers, and you can like pinch it and sit it in the bottom here. Now we're going to grab our float. Make sure your gasket is on here, on the correct side of your float. You want it underneath your float, because if you put your float on, this gasket can no longer go on properly. Then you just want to gently and nicely place that on there. Put our 5 screws back in. All right, and then lastly, these two guys just need to gently be placed into there and spin them in. But yeah, now that we have these two pieces in here, I can confidently say this carburetor is fully clean inside of it. The fuel filter's clean. All my pieces are looking good. I have the jets that I want in the right sizes. My idle mixer screws are properly set. The idle time is set. Everything is good to go and bench tested as well as we can get it before I put it in the car. I'm going to be making another video on how to tune this once it's in the car, because that is a whole other set of problems and things you need to adjust, including your linkage and all that. So that video will be coming out not very long after this one. Otherwise, I'm going to go get this in my car. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.